younger Dawn version.
Hopefully she was more happy. We try to like we don't. We try to But the big thing is our training team, so she's carrying it forward, requesting the training.
That's good, and they get excited about it.
Yeah, Mike. Okay.
Because that's where I always send it. It's nothing personal.
Yeah, no. Wherever you like. Yeah, that's right.
We are.
So things going on for you, I'm sure.
Sorry, I was about to talk with you.
Oh, no, no.
High school
Agenda for
classmate of
next
mine.
year.
Oh,
That's a
sure.
separate one.
We're going around laughing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, what's so impressive is
I think we should. Okay, if we'll settle down, we're getting ready to get started. In case you're wondering what the students are doing, Mary's having them dismantle and clean up the posters. So there's a little bit of that. Let's do that. We have two panels this afternoon, and the first panel is we're going to get Don Foley to kick off the first panel this afternoon. Don's Director of Advanced Manufacturing and Logistics and Senior Project Manager at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. IEDC has played a very proactive role in the state in identifying ways in which Indiana can become a more competitive place for business than it already is. So, and in addition, Don's brought along a couple of companies in Indiana who are representative of sort of this new way. So, yeah.
great. Thank you. Not that what I.
Yeah, all you do is move this.
Good. Wonderful, thank you. Well, first of all, our appreciation and thanks to Ananth and his team for having us here to meet with you today. You know, it's fair to say, hopefully we can agree that we live at least in interesting times. And what is going to come in the future, maybe we don't know. But we do have, I think, a few things, a few bright spots we'd like to talk to you about today. And also we have two companies with us. Ted Fyock representing Anderson Tool and Engineering. We have Andy Platt, who's also with Personics, and his associate Kerry Davis, who are going to give us some insight about manufacturing transitions from the inside. What we'd like to try to do today with just a few minutes of your time is to share with you a little bit about some of the transitions, if you will, that are taking place that we're observing. First of all, just by rough show of hands, how many of you here are with suppliers or manufacturers? Okay. And from academia? Okay. Few hands? Okay. And any students? Any other students? Okay. A few students. All right. We'll just try to make sure we address several topics.
What about the logistics people?
Oh, excuse me. Okay, logistics folks? Several. All right, there's a whole handful of logistics. All right, thank you for that distinction. One of the things we want to try to talk a little bit about today is the difference that we see between the issue of markets and the business environment. Markets right now are suffering, and they're being challenged in many, many different ways. Auto manufacturing, RVs, housing, okay? But we still have what we would suggest is a fairly strong business environment. Now, how do we distinguish those? Well, we want to try to share with you a little bit of that notion. Are there transitions taking place? There certainly are. And we'll see some of that firsthand with some of our companies here. How do we know whether we have a decent operating environment for businesses in the state of Indiana? One of the ways is we do a survey here through CEO Index. CEO Index does a national survey trying to identify different places across the United States and how good a place they are to do business. Just to share with you a little of the detail here on this legend. In the blue, you see the states that might be considered to be some of the worst places to do business according to their distinctions. yellow, of course, up toward the good side, and then orange being the best operating environment. And you'll see that Indiana here is the only state outside of the Sun Belt, if you will. It's listed number 1 in the Midwest, okay? And you'll see down in the Southeast a number of states also. Now how we distinguish this is groups of CEOs who make those decisions about where they want to do business. And so Indiana being listed among those. Now what else goes into this? For example, we just recently were observed as number 1 in the Midwest by the Tax Foundation for the different associated business taxes here in our state. Recently recognized as number 1 in the nation in jobs from foreign investment. Number 1 in the nation on jobs per capita. So there's some examples there. We also just had a bond rating improved to AAA from AA based on the diversification of our economy and fiscal constraint. So these are all measures that CEOs take into consideration when they try to select a place that they're going to do business. So we see this taking place. Are there changes? There certainly are, and we are tracking those. One of the various changes that we see, and Anant had actually referenced this a little bit earlier, is the exports. Now again, we're looking in the rearview mirror here with some of these numbers, and will that change in the future? Perhaps. We think that this is a fairly good example here of some of the bright spots. 2007 new record, $25.9 billion in exports. It's a new record for the state. Exports to Germany and Brazil up 50%. And look at this next one, exports to China up 30%. Now, that certainly was not a statistic that I would have imagined seeing in this data. Absolutely not. Pharmaceuticals, of course, growing well. We have a great pharmaceutical manufacturing and research cluster here in our state. Now, I just want to show with you briefly here some of the year-to-date results. These are the metrics that we keep at the IEDC to try to help us understand what are we doing, how are we doing it, what do we need to continue to improve on. A few of these numbers, 130 projects with 16,121 new jobs committed. Now, the important thing here is committed, and the reason that committed is such an important term, many of the plants for these jobs have not even been built yet. So it does take a good, year, 2 years, sometimes longer, for them to reach full employment. So the jobs that we committed or had committed 2 years ago are now coming online. Jobs like those at Toyota, just down the way here, Toyota with Subaru, Honda, and a few others across the state. One other interesting point, the bottom of the first column there, $22.56 hourly wage average. Now that's over the about $18 average that we have currently in our state. So the new jobs that are coming in are well-paying jobs. Now they do require higher skills, which is a challenge our companies have perhaps run into different places. So these jobs do require higher skills, and the skill sets sometimes do not match what we have in certain regions of the state. Unemployment now at 6.2%, down from in August. The national unemployment rate right now is about 6.1, so we're slightly ahead of that. The next line item here is for the smaller businesses. We operate a fund called the 21st Century Fund, and the 21st Century Fund funds these innovative research projects for the small companies that are going to create new markets. And we have funded about 59 of those to the tune of about $77 billion. So now, we want to try to make sure we share a balanced picture. And yes, we are challenged. Many of our markets are challenged. But I want to suggest to you, perhaps give you some food for thought as we consider whether our business environment still supports good business and the conduct of inexpensive business practices here. So now to take us into the next step, though, we have Ted with us today. He's going to tell you a little about the transitions that have taken place within his organization. Brief note about Ted. Ted graduated from Purdue with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and he also completed a master's from GMI. He has held engineering and management positions with Corning Glass, that is, RCA, Thompson, and with Anderson Tool. He's been president there since '99. And he also serves on the advisory board for Purdue Technology out in Anderson, Muncie area, and he's also the board of directors for the Indiana Manufacturers Association. So, with that, Ted's going to talk to us a little bit about transitions he's seeing in his organization.
Good afternoon. Anderson Tool, will give you a very brief overview about Anderson Tool. We're a 63-year company, started in Anderson as a machine shop supporting the GM operations that were based in Anderson. That would be the original guide lamp division, Delco Remy divisions. About around the 1960s, we started doing basically machine shop work, so we're doing fixturing, jigs, small parts, etc. And then around the early 60s, a couple clients asked us if we could bolt parts together and do a little bit more value-added things. So that started us in special machine business, and today about 50 to 60% of what we do is the design and build of custom-built manufacturing equipment and specialty systems. We still do about 25% of traditional machine shop work, about 10% industrial controls work, and then some other things that we've gotten into recently, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're 85 employees, about 85,000 square feet facility, and we are now an ESOP, about 80% ESOP, where the employees own about 80% of the company. Just want to touch about a few transitions, and I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 examples of transitions at Anderson Tool today, talking about a few examples in manufacturing, some marketing shift for us, and some transitions in our service offerings, and a few examples of that. We have 3 manufacturing plants in our machine shop operation, 7 buildings in all, and this is one view of plant number 1, which is our shop operations, and this was one side of that structure in February of 2005. And the machines along the side there were all Bridgeport machines, manual machining, small machines. In fact, one of our employees, he hired in 1964, and he says those 6 machines were sitting there in 1964 when he walked in and interviewed for a job there. So those haven't moved for a while from 64 to 2005. On the opposite side of that aisleway, you'll see similar, more of the same. More Bridgeports, a couple CNC centers in the back of that building, and this was about 12,000 square foot, and this was the original structure that we moved into in 1961. One thing we were being faced was labor content in our work. Customers saying, you know, I can go to China and get this for cheaper, I can go elsewhere and get this cheaper. Why can't you partner with Chinese people? I can take 40, 50% of the labor, if not more, out of this type of work. And we were faced with having to do something. We've come out of 3 years of extremely hard, difficult economic times, 2001, 2, and 3. During that period of time, almost 35% of the machine shops in this country closed their doors. So it was a very strenuous time. Those that survived that, like Anderson Tool, were not in the greatest of shape, and it was a very difficult time. And we were faced with either giving up or surviving, and right, wrong, or indifferent, we were one of the survivors. But we weren't in the greatest of shape. And because of those 3 or 4 years of economic hard times, we had stopped putting aside capital investment, stopped doing a lot of things that we needed to do to maintain the technology. So we were faced with a dilemma. How do we get back on track? Well, you know, coming out of some economic times that were really strenuous for us, it was, you know, lay the cards down, put the money on the table, and invest back into the company. This is what that same first photograph looked like in May of 2005. So just 3 months later, we invested in over $300,000 in new machinery and equipment. We replaced virtually every Bridgeport in the building with small CNC type what's called tool room mills. We had reconfigured some of our other CNCs, and we had another machine to move into this cell. And we were going out of the situation. One of the transitions we made to compete was getting away from a one-man, one-machine type operation and going into setting up flexible cells of machines where one man can operate 2, 3, or in some cases 4 machines. You can do the math on the efficiency gain and the productivity gain. The single operation going from a Bridgeport to one of these CNC mills, we calculated was about a 260% gain. So if I also all of a sudden gave one guy 2 of those machines, you can do the math. So this helped us get on the top side of the efficiency of operations. The opposite view of that same building, again, more of the same, more organized setup in cells. On the back one corner, we moved one of our existing CNC lathes. We put a brand new CNC lathe behind it, and then told that operator, you're going to operate 2 of those systems, and then put a manual machine on the side where it could do a single operations. And what's important when we did all this and we started making this mentality shift, this cultural shift in our operations, it wasn't us cramming this down the employee's throat. It was going to them and saying, guys, what do you think? And actually, the employees came back and helped us lay out and configure the plant, bought into this as a way of survival. This is how we compete. This is what we have to do. And that's part of the cultural difference between maybe a privately held firm and an ESOP, because these guys bought into the fact this is their survival, it's their company, this is what they have to do. So this is one of the operational shifts that we made back in 2005. That was about a $330,000 investment. And we've continued that track now, and here as of 2008, we just made another acquisition a few months ago, and we've put about $1.25 million of new equipment into our facility the last couple of years. The one thing that's also a challenge in our industry is the cost of technology. Not that the extreme cost of technology, but the type of machinery and equipment today, the value is so low cost compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Literally, 2 guys in a garage can, with a very low investment, get to where we're at pretty quick. As an example, we replaced a machine that we purchased in 1980, and that machine was $1.5 million in 1980 dollars. And we were faced about 1.5 years ago with a possible rebuild of that machine. It would have cost us about $200,000 to remanufacture that machine. And yet we replaced that machine for $247,000. 3 times faster, larger work envelope, same precision as that machine back in 1980, quicker, faster, the whole thing. So you can get an idea of the cost of technology and the value of technology in the machine tool industry. So you really have to continually invest, or others will catch you up and go around you rather quickly. That was a manufacturing example. Let's talk a little bit about marketing focus. Several years ago, I could point to automotive, consumer electronics, and consumer goods. 3 businesses, 3 markets. I could also talk to I could talk to 1 client in each of those 3 industries, and those 3 customers made up year in, year out, 85, 90, 95% of our business. And the other 80 customers that we had would make up the other balance. One of those clients was Thompson Consumer Electronics. They're no longer operating in the United States, and they no longer have any operations. Scratch them off. The other client was Procter & Gamble, and they have been a loyal customer of ours since 1964 and continue to be our #1 client. So they're still there and hanging in there, but the other major customer was Delphi, and we all know Delphi is up and down in the state of the automotive industry, and we have worked Delphi in our equation down to where Delphi business is now less than 10% of what we do. So you take one of our 3 major guys out of the equation, you take Delphi that was anywhere from 30 to 40 to 50% of our business on given years down to below 10%. We've got some voids to fill. And one thing we wanted to do, we wanted to develop a strategy to get away from automotive, and we were looking at some of the other elements of our business. Aerospace. We have been doing aerospace since 1979. But a single client, and that type of work was less than 1% of our business. Military, same situation. One military client, been doing military work for almost 25 years, and probably represented 0.5% of what we did. Food. Had one food customer, we've been doing work since 1979. And again, would average on given years when they were expanding and doing things and buying equipment, 3%, 4% of what we were doing. When they were not investing in capital equipment, we were down to 0.1% of our sales revenue coming from food industry. We had a lot of experience in some of those other industries, and we said, why don't we take that experience and go see what else is out there other than these single clients? Today, we've taken aerospace from that one client to 4 clients. We've taken our military work, and now we're doing military contracts with about 5 different customers. And we have a multiplicity of food customers, and that continues to grow. And we have the point now where we consider a considerable market in our business where we have an exposure of 5% or greater sales. If I went back historically, the three markets that I described earlier were always 5% or greater, and we had never had another market that represented more than 5%. Today, each one of those markets, as well as a couple I've already mentioned and a couple others that aren't on that page, now represent 5 or even a couple of those 10% or greater market value. So we looked at going back to the basics, understanding what we do when certain businesses develop strategies where we could go in and enter into new markets with new customers. And that has been a market focus for us, instead of some companies have made a transition going from automotive and going into medical devices or some other market and other niche markets. And what we did was just the opposite. We decided to go into 4 or 5 different areas and see how we could diversify into multiple areas. And for us, it's made a great transition. Automotive, I've listed up there, and you'll see I say old to new. We've driven our, what I call traditional automotive business down below that 10-15% level. But our automotive sales last year represented 33% of our total sales. So where's the rest of the automotive coming from? Well, we've looked at emerging automotive technologies as a whole new business, separate from the traditional automotive customers that we've had for 30, 40 years. Things like lithium battery manufacturing, electric hybrid drives, hydrostatic transmissions, all of the alternative type of vehicle technologies that are emerging and developing. There's a lot of research development activity going on in those markets, a lot of emerging companies, and we've been extremely successful marketing those clients and getting in at the forefront and the foundation of those markets, and that's been a great growth potential for us. So that's some of our marketing focus changes and how we've transitioned our sales revenue from where we were 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago to where we're at today. We've also entered new markets. We've gotten into transportation maintenance. We've got one client and a customer now that we're building systems in that area. That's a market that's kind of totally independent. It's in snow and de-icing control. If it snows, if we get freezing rains, if winters continue to happen in the northern United States, that business is going to be good for us, regardless of what the Dow looks like today. Alternative energy is a good market that we're getting into, not only in the automotive industry, but we're into ethanol manufacturing, which is listed down there. We've got some emerging technologies going into ethanol. We're into wind turbines, opportunities on the horizon with wind turbines. And then the other thing, we've started another unique business, which is we've gotten into a compound bow manufacturing opportunity and archery products. So, and the last one on that page is another contract that we just signed to go into construction equipment manufacturing. So we've gone out and really put our efforts out to see what we could do with our existing client base, our services base, and what we could do differently with different customers. And now we're probably spread in about 12, 15 different markets. In doing that, we had to walk away from some customers and just tell some people, thanks, no thanks, don't go away mad, just go away. And you probably heard that before, but sometimes you gotta walk away from your non-profitable businesses. But before you do that, you gotta have something to take the place of that. We were fortunate enough in the right time to have some of these other marketing things come online to where we could tell some of our clients, just go away and walk away from businesses that were no longer profitable for us. How do we achieve that? Well, you look at each of those markets you want to go into and you kind of develop a marketing strategy, almost a mini business plan associated with each of those new opportunities. Not get, a business plan that's 30, 40 pages thick, but just the basics and the fundamentals to know enough about what you're getting into and develop how that fits with your strategy and our solutions and our product offerings and being in the right place at the right time. And then you network, and then you network, and then when you get done doing that, you network more. And, when I talk about networking, when I look at Purdue, the Indiana Office of Energy and Defense helped us greatly in the energy systems and some of the defense businesses that we've taken on. Technology parks, certified tech parks are popping up all over the state. And with them is emerging companies, startup companies, and new technologies. And we've been there to help those parks and some of those new startup companies with their development of their product and their services, and we become their virtual factory because a startup can't afford to operate and hire 30 people and manufacture their own products from time to time. So we've been very successful there. We've partnered with the City of Anderson, economic development groups within the Anderson area, and as companies have looked at Indiana because like Don said, Indiana is very favorable, right time for companies to come in. We're kind of one of the first companies now that when a client comes into Anderson or Madison County and the city or the economic development group's bringing a potential client in and they may need some manufacturing assistance and help, they come to Anderson Tool. We're on their list. They come in, they see what we're doing, they see the type of work we're doing, we see how they can support their startups and their operations. And then eventually it's helped on 2 or 3 occasions where we pick up business in those opportunities. IEDC has been a great assistance in what they have done in a very short period of time. And all of those groups are tremendous efforts where you market, network, you meet people, you interface, and you find opportunities. And it's been a great way for us to make those transitions. And finally, services. I've told you what we traditionally do. We do machine shop work, we build machinery and equipment, we do electrical controls. Well, we had to change some of our service offerings. And a couple of things that we've done is contract manufacturing. And getting into where we're actually manufacturing somebody else's product. We're doing that again and again and again. That's, for us, it becomes repetitive work. Typically, we're landing 3 5-year contracts to do that work. It creates a base of work activity every year that we can rely upon. And then we can build up those particular markets and say, I've got so many man hours booked for next year because I have a 3-year contract or I have a 5-year contract that I have to manufacture somebody else's product for. That's been a great opportunity for us and a really good stabilization of the hills and valleys that come with our type of business. R&D, we're doing a lot of research and development, not only for some of our own product development right now, but we're partnered with Purdue, doing things for companies like Rolls-Royce. We're doing a lot of research and development right now in a lot of different areas. We just landed our first SBIR grant, partnered with Food Science Department here. We're developing some things in the food industry and food quick service restaurant industries. We're doing just a tremendous amount of product development right now, a field that we've never dealt with 5-10 years ago. And you look at these 3 service service offerings up here, totally new to us 3 or 4 years ago.